Welcome back to Alien Cocoons, Episode 6. Crap. It was a teenage boy carrying a shotgun. If we surprised him, it could go bad. Dad very calmly and quietly said, "Don't shoot, we're friendlies." The boy jumped and looked around, shaking and beginning to sweat. Dad said, "We're wearing ghillie suits, so don't be frightened." He stood up with his hands in the air. The boy was holding his shotgun half-heartedly. Dad said, "My name is Steve. This is my son, Scott." I stood up slowly. He stared at us for a second. I bet we really looked strange. He said, "I'm Tim. You guys soldiers?" Dad said, "Used to be. Sorry about how we're dressed. Our clothes are in the dryer." This seemed to lighten the mood. Dad asked if he was the only one here. My parents left for Portland Saturday morning. They haven't been back. He seemed distraught. Understandable. "What are those things?" he asked. Dad told him what we knew. Tim said he went for a ride Saturday, and when he returned, they were in his yard. They saw him on his horse and walked over to where he stopped. He was scared to death, but they just looked at him, then walked back to their ship and left. Dad asked if they had tried to gas him. He said no, that he just sat there, still on his horse, and they looked at him for a few minutes, then walked away. Dad wondered if they thought he was part of the horse. Just how much do they really know about us? I would think they would have studied us for a long time before invading. Dad said, "We have a safe place. Do you want to go with us?" Tim thought for a minute. "Where?" "Not far, maybe 2.5 miles. Tim walked over to the horses. He talked quietly to them. "I can't leave them," he replied. "I don't feel right leaving you here," Dad said. We stood in silence for a few minutes. Dad started questioning Tim. He wanted to be sure the kid was safe. We had to admit the aliens were paying more attention to the forest north of here. Tim smiled and said, "Aliens are stoners too?" "What do you mean?" "That guy up there grows pot." We both smiled. "Yes, he does." "How do you know?" Tim seemed a little embarrassed. "I sneak in and get some sometimes." "You sneak in?" "Yeah, that guy thinks he has it all locked down, but it's easy to get in." The aliens were patrolling the roads. We needed a way in. Tim started explaining how there was a small stream that ran from up the mountain, across their property, and across Joe's property. Then it ran east of our property and onto the Columbia River. Dad's eyes lit up. "Is there a bridge over the stream on the road between the properties?" "No, just a big culvert." "What about where the road is north of Joe's?" I'm not sure. I think it might be the same thing." Dad seemed really happy about this. "Okay, can you take us there?" Tim nodded his head yes. "Okay, let's get you ready. We will have you back tonight." With that, we began dressing Tim. It didn't take long, and we had him looking like a pile of hay. We watched outside for any sign of the aliens. Nothing. We waited for the ship to pass over, and we made our move. We made it to the tree line and turned north. Within minutes, I could hear the water from the stream. We stayed inside the trees, following the stream for about a half mile, when Tim stopped us. He pointed downstream. You could see a road with what looked like a 6-foot culvert going under it. We studied the road until we could time the patrols on the road. They were moving slowly in groups of 2. Dad pulled 2 phones out and checked each one. He handed me one and told me to go about 500 feet west and place the phone as close to the road as possible. Then get as close to the culvert as possible. He would go east and do the same. He told Tim to move toward the culvert as quietly as possible. We would know when to move to the culvert. I did as Dad instructed. The forest was very thick, so it was easy to get down almost onto the road. I laid the phone next to a tree and moved toward the stream. I could see Dad and Tim hiding in the trees when I got there. We hid there for a couple of minutes when the alarms on the phones went off. The aliens stopped patrolling and went to look for the phones. We went for the culvert. We didn't stop until we were in the trees and on the other side. When I stopped, I turned to see if we had been noticed. That's when I saw the flaw in Joe's security. He had placed his fence over the culvert along the edge of the road. One of the aliens must have heard us. It was moving in our direction. It wasn't coming directly at us, so I didn't think it was 100% sure where we were. It kept coming slowly until it made contact with the fence. When it touched the fence, there was a loud pop, and it stopped. The other aliens moved toward it cautiously. Then the eye popped open, and one of the eel-like creatures crawled out. What we thought to be the aliens must have been nothing more than some kind of vehicle, and the little eel-like things were inside piloting them. It also must have had its own atmosphere inside, because the little eel was a salmon color when it came out, and it was turning black and seemed to be dying. We moved away slowly. The other aliens were paying too much attention to their buddy. It didn't take us long to find Joe's shack. He was very glad to see us. The aliens had him a little worried after 2 more ships showed up and were constantly over his property. We made our way back to the stream and followed it to the road that our cabin was on. We did the same thing using 2 more phones to distract the aliens, only this time we went about 1,000 feet each way. We decided we were a little close before. When we got to our side, we were at most a half a mile to the cabin. The problem was the forest wasn't very thick until about halfway. Luckily, the aliens didn't seem too interested in our side of Joe's place. I felt relieved when we were finally in the thicker forest again. Suddenly, Dad said, "Damn, look at our cabin." I got to where I could see through the trees. It was abused. The siding had been ripped off in places, windows were broken, and the door was just hanging there. We didn't know what we would find, so we told Joe and Tim to stay hidden until we checked out the cabin. We found them a good place to hide and made our way toward the cabin. The ship floated over once, but it didn't stop. If I had to guess, I think they were bored. These aliens seemed to have a problem with overconfidence. It seemed once they cleared an area, they believed no one would come back. It was easy getting in and out of Troutdale. We slowly entered the back door. The inside looked much the same as the outside. They had put holes in the walls and pulled up floorboards. Our cabinet had been partially destroyed. I wasn't sure if we could even get it open. We made sure there weren't any aliens around and returned to the cabinet. Luckily, it still worked. I went to the door to signal Tim and Joe to come on in. I looked out slowly to see the ship slowly approaching. I stayed back until it went by. Then I looked out to signal Tim and Joe. I didn't see them at first. My blood froze when I did. There were 2 aliens about 50 yards behind them, moving in their direction. That was when I heard a clicking coming from the front of the house. Dad said, "Crap, we have company." If you like this, hit the like button, subscribe, and hit the notifications bell. Thank you.